This is the Whitelaw PLLC Tailgate Show on Lansing's Big Talker, 1240 WJIM and Classic Rock 94.9 MMQ. Brought to you by Whitelaw PLLC, Shaheen Chevrolet, Price Right Auto and RV, Blue Moon Belgian White. A PLLC Tailgate Show on Lansing's Big Talker, 1240 WJIM, Classic Rock 94.9 MMQ, and special game day edition of The Game, 7:30 a.m. Today's broadcast is brought to you by Whitelaw PLLC, Shaheen Chevrolet, Price Right Auto and RV, Blue Moon Belgian White. Now, let's talk to the Dean of Sports, Tim Staudt, and offensive-minded host, Beanie Howell, from the Price Right Auto and RV Studios.
Welcome in, Whitelaw PLLC Tailgate Show from the Price Right RV Studios here at 1240 WJIM, Lansing's Big Talker, and Classic Rock 94.9 MMQ. Also brought to you by Blue Moon Belgian White, Shaheen Chevrolet and Cadillac, MSU Healthcare Sports Medicine, Doubting Industries, Schupan & Sons Recycling Industrial Services, Gravity Smokehouse, and MSU Federal Credit Union. I'm Beanie. You can hear me weekdays 4 to 6 p.m. on Offensive Minded on the Game 7:30 a.m. Lansing's only sports station, joined by the Dean of Sports himself, Tim Staudt, heard daily 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. on the Game 7:30 a.m. And behind the glass, keeping us on the air, keeping you updated on weather, it's Brock Palmbush, also heard daily from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. Staudt and Sports on the Game 7:30 a.m. All right, MSU, season on the brink at perhaps the most surprising team this college football season, certainly in the Big Ten, the 7-1 and number 14 in the initial college football playoff rankings, fighting Illini of Illinois. Weather might be a factor today, Tim. What do you think? Per the Weather Channel, windy with showers, 50% chance of rain, and gusts up to 50 miles per hour today.
I thought that was the forecast here.
It is.
If it would have been a home game today, it would have been a little tough on the fans, let alone in the stands. Andy told me last night that through the game itself, he didn't think that was going to be a big deal down there, that most of the weather here cleared through there last night. But I guess once we get to, kickoff, we'll see one way or the other.
Guys, I actually have the forecast here. Thank you to the trusty internet. Temperature steady in the mid-60s, showers likely, winds out of the south 20 to 25 miles an hour. Gusts as high as 50 miles an hour, maybe even more than that.
That sounds like you just said.
Yeah, there's a wind, and there is a wind advisory in Champaign, Illinois.
Until 8 p.m., so there will be pretty bad gusts at time. I don't know if that matters because Illinois wants to run on offense.
Well, you hear it all the time, year after year after year on a wind issue. I hear all the experts say, well, it favors this team or that team. I've never bought into that at all. I think it can create some strange plays. I think it can do that, but favoring or not favoring one team over another, other than Brock knows that I always say when it's a close game and it's in the fourth quarter, I want the wind at my back if we get down to where a field goal or an extra point's going to win or lose this thing one way or the other. I saw that last night in a high school game where the wind was a factor last night in this area near the end of a game. But whether it's a factor today in Illinois or any place else in the Midwest or in the Big Ten or not, I guess we'll find out.
Historically, the 48th all-time meeting between MSU and Illinois dates back to 1955. That was MSU's first year in the Big Ten. MSU leads the series 26 wins for them, 19 for Illinois, 2 ties. Illinois has won the last 2 played. 2019, with very forgettable for those in this part of the country, where Illinois scored 27 points in the fourth quarter to overcome a 28-3 halftime deficit, winning at Spartans Stadium 37-34 in Mark D'Antonio's final year. And perhaps more interestingly, Tim, the guy who caught the game-winning touchdown for Illinois is now Michigan State's starting tight end, Daniel Barker.
I mean, he had 2 losses of his 57 in his 13-year career, which to me stand out over any other losses. The one was the home loss to Central Michigan on a second field goal at the end of the game after Central missed one and a penalty let them kick it over, and they made it. And that Illinois game, because that was a Lovie Smith team that was going absolutely nowhere, and it's 28-3 at the half, and everybody's a sleeper, they've left. And like you say, out of nowhere, in the second half, Illinois looked like the '85 Bears. and they come back and hit one with that kid late in the game, and somehow, some way, and boy, I'll tell you, looking at Mark on the sidelines, I think he felt afterwards a loss he'll never forget. And I wouldn't either if I would have lost that game, too.
Totally agree. Speaking of, State's made some progress the last two games on defense. Kept Wisconsin's run game in check, generated some big timely turnovers in that game. Last week, despite the result, 29-7 loss at Michigan, their defense, took a Michigan team that was averaging, 50 or 45 points per game, made them settle for 5 field goals, really only gave up 1 touchdown. The last one was thanks to a snap that went over a guy's head at the 5-yard line. So the defense had made strides, but the problem with that is the reason the defense had made those strides is guys came back from injury, so then State could move some players back to their natural positions. Now that's all out the window, with 8 suspensions and 4 of them being guys who either started or played significantly, including Jacoby Windman and Angelo Gross, and even Zion Young, who's a true freshman and started last week at defensive end. That's probably out the window. I'm guessing State won't be able to play that 4-3 as much, which they would really like to do against Illinois, given how they play. So, I guess what I'm getting at, Tim, does this feel to you like it's shaping up the same way as the recipe Minnesota had with a ton of success against Michigan State?
Well, I think motivation's a huge factor in the game today, and going in, one would think that clearly favors Illinois. I thought what was interesting in Michigan State's defense last week was not only did it hang in there, but it had to play 40 minutes on the field because the time of possession Michigan had was 2-1, 40-20. Now, if that's the same issue today because Illinois likes to ball control it, I'm not sure Michigan State's not going to see a better running back today than it saw last week because I like Blake Corum. I like him. But this Chase Young of Illinois has had 2 phenomenal years. But he plays for Illinois. So nobody nationally knows the guy, but he's the real deal. At least he has been thus far. And I think they're absolutely going to try to run him today the way Michigan ran Blake Corum last week. And look, Corum still ran for 177 yards. Michigan's offense was on the field for 40 minutes. So even though they didn't score at will, but State's offense was only on the field for 20 minutes, and son of a gun, they scored all of 7 points with that kind of time on. And I think that's a huge factor again today, too. The number one factor to me is motivation. Motivation and home stadium. That, to me, are the 2 biggest factors, and neither one favors State.
You mentioned time of possession. Illinois, number 2 in the nation in time of possession, averaging nearly 36 minutes per game. The only team better is Air Force, who runs an ancient offense. Michigan State, second worst in the nation at 24.5 minutes per game. Fatal recipe for State, as you alluded to. And honestly, this has been a problem for a long time. Actually, this has been a problem under Tucker. Like, the offense does not sustain drives. Even last year's, it was a quick strike offense. That defense is not good enough, and it's on the field too much. It really exposes them.
Well, they don't run the ball, so they don't run the clock. So if you don't run the clock, your time of possession isn't going to be very great. I mean, now, I'm anxious to see, when I look at the numbers on Illinois' defense, what they are second or first in the nation in points scored against, and they're number 1 in the nation in yards given up, which is 224, something like that. Well, I would think for Illinois, the matchup's good coming in, other than the fact that there are so many surprises in these games in college football. That's why they play, and I don't think State's going down to lose, but I think the dynamic for this one is dramatically different from what it was going in last Saturday, because I think there was an element of people that still thought, State's going to play their ever-loving brand, and I thought they played hard. Yeah, I did. I think they played hard, but they got beat by a better team, and they were on a road, and it just didn't set up for them.
Isn't there a chance for that today, though? Because with everything that's happened from the after the game shenaniganery last week with the post-game stuff, the stuff in the tunnel, isn't there a chance that has a circling the wagons effect?
Well, it could, but I don't. To me, the natural sense for an athlete at this level in this situation at Michigan State is they've lost to their rival. They got 8 guys that are out for all this. They're down. They haven't had the year they want. They know they're another big underdog today. They'll go play, but I don't think you play with the confidence. And, let's face it, even starting with a quarterback, how confident is he today that he's going to be able to lead his team to a legitimate win on the road? The other thing is Illinois, they're playing for something. I mean, they're ranked in the top 15 in the AP poll. They've never been to the Big Ten championship game, and they're not clinched there yet. They still have a very arduous game at Michigan coming up in 2 weeks.
And don't they play Purdue yet?
They have Purdue next week at home before they play Northwestern to end it. So, winning today, they got to look at Michigan State and say, we're never going to get them in a better situation going into the game than what we've got today. They got 8 defensive players out. They've had an awful year by their standards. They've lost 5 of their last 6. They can't score. They got 7 points last week. They got 7 against Minnesota in the last 20 seconds. They only scored, 2 touchdowns against. You can go ahead and add it all up. And now you know why Illinois, I guess, is a 16-point favorite, right?
17 points.
17. We're adding a point to it.
I've got a killer stat for you. Listen to this. So we know, we talked about this last week, and now the number is State's beaten Michigan 10 of the last 15 years. Of the 5 they didn't. What do you think? What do you think Michigan State's record is in the games following the 5 Michigan losses in the last decade and a half?
After the losses, off the top of my head, I don't know.
Got a guess? Either of you?
Off the losses, 0-5.
I would guess a losing record. How about you, Brock?
It used to be that way before Mark D'Antonio got there. He always did a very good job of getting his team up after whether they beat Michigan or whether they lost to Michigan. It just seemed that way because in the old days it used to be, we lost to Michigan, our season's over. We lost to our arch rivals, our season's over. Let's just, forget the rest of the season.
That was also a criticism that even if they won the game, they would.
Exactly, because they were so high after beating their arch rival, they were just like, we forgot there's the rest of the season.
But you
to play.
can make that argument for Michigan, too.
Well, hang on.
To a degree.
Listen to this number. Of the 5 games, the last 15 years, following a loss to Michigan, 4 wins, 1 loss.
Yeah.
Part of that would depend on when they played them and then who they played, obviously, afterwards.
True.
Well, that's funny you should say that because the 1 loss was at Illinois in 2016.
Oh, wow.
Now, that's why I'm paid the big bucks.
Wow.
Hell of a stat by me.
That's scary.
But this Illinois team, to me, is dramatically different than what the Illinois team. In fact, the last 2 that beat Michigan State, and the game in Champaign that they won, the first of those 2, was one of the worst games for both of them. I just couldn't believe how bad both of them were.
Didn't Damian Terry start
something?
For State
I think he did, yeah.
It's a vague nightmare because, it was an extremely winnable game that they simply didn't win against a bad team. And Illinois was a bad team a couple of years ago. Well, now, they're a very veteran team. The quarterback, for them, has made...
DeVito, yeah.
He's made a lot of improvement.
Syracuse transfer.
He got hurt in the middle of the year, but came back. And, and they don't have him flinging it all over the place. They want this Chase Brown to chase the defense down the field. And I was looking...
guys, excuse me, I was looking at his stats. 1,208 yards. That's more than what Blake Corum's got at Michigan. And we've talked about how great Blake Corum's been this year, and he has.
Well,
but this guy,
Chase Brown is the nation's leading rusher.
He's the nation's leading rusher.
Second in yards per carry, and he's doing it with, let's be honest, less than half the talent Blake Corum has in front of him, right?
No question. So
their offensive line's very, very good.
But it's not, and that's the thing. It's not super talented, and that's probably what's most frustrating about this matchup from Michigan State's perspective. Last week is one thing. You go up against a team that has more talent than you at virtually every position. State's a more talented team here. They are. That's measurable. Definable.
You mean against Illinois?
Yes.
All right, I'll argue that.
You disagree?
You mean you're saying State's got more talent than Illinois?
Yes.
No, I'll disagree with that.
Where? Running back, but where else?
Almost every other position.
What?
Well, I'll take all 11 of Illinois' defensive players.
Can you name one?
No, I
exactly.
don't need to.
Exactly. And that doesn't mean they're not good.
I would go on the other side. Name me really standout players for Michigan State.
That are going to play today? That's the thing.
Yeah.
That's the thing. And by the way, I'm not trying to say that the State's loaded on defense with talent. Of course not. But that brings me to another, and maybe this isn't the right.
8.9 points.
Well, then does that go to coaching?
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely it does. And it has something to do also, I know you're going to buy into this. This is your line, Tim. It has something to do with the schedules you play.
Oh, there's no question. And that's where State maybe gets a break today a little bit because Illinois' schedule. Look at all the different teams that have had good years, but you look at the schedule they've played and you say, my golly, and I've seen Illinois. I watched them play Chattanooga. I saw them play Wyoming.
I unfortunately watched them play Iowa.
I saw them play Iowa.
Oh, that was awful.
9-6. weeks.
That was awful.
But you know what? You got to win it, though.
Yep.
I mean, one way or the other, you got to win it. They'll take 9-6 today.
Sure.
Yes, they will. Oh, especially in this weather.
What's their signature win? And I'm not saying that in a critical way. I'm just asking. Getting Wisconsin's coach fired,
two
right?
Of them. They blew them out on the road,
34-10.
Yeah, they beat Minnesota by 2 touchdowns at home. Now, Minnesota's quarterback, I don't think played in that game.
Right.
That's after Minnesota essentially won by 5 touchdowns here.
Yes.
If you take out the last TD with 27 seconds to go.
Yeah.
So to me, those are the 2 signature wins that Well, and I give them credit for Nebraska on the road, too. Nebraska's trying to save that coach. There's 85,000 people there. They're loyal to a fault. You still got to go in there, and you still got to go on the road, and you got to go in a big stadium, and blah, blah, blah. And they won decisively. I mean, they won decisively in that game. So, it's not like they're just kind of hanging on with some some lucky win. I mean, they pretty much dominated some of these teams in the Big Ten that they've played, and they dominated Wyoming. They dominated Chattanooga. But to your point, the other question to me is the talent they'll see from Michigan State today, where does that rate with the 8 teams they've played thus far? And I don't know that.
Well, on offense, it's probably their best test in terms of a passing attack. But the problem is, State's got receivers galore. We've seen that. Michigan had trouble with Keon Coleman for at least a drive before State forgot that he was out there dominating one-on-one. But probably the best test they've faced vertically on offense. But we also should give them credit because they are about 1 inch, Illinois is. We should give them credit because they're 1 inch away from being 8-0.
Yes, they are.
And you could argue they ought to be. Some people think that touchdown that wasn't the Calvin Johnson rule against Indiana back in it was their second game, but it was week 1, should have counted. And if it does, this is an 8-0 team that's probably, top 10?
Well, yes. They're awfully close. And I saw that game, and it was a game where both of them made a number of mistakes. But to your point, that was in the, Labor Day weekend.
Yep.
It was at night in Indiana, so Indiana still thinks it can play. And the game went back and forth. And if you just take out 1 or 2 Illinois mistakes, they get out of there with a win. So at the time, I thought, these are 2 lousy Big Ten teams right here. Yep. This is why everybody thought they're no good, and they're no good. Even though Illinois had beat Wyoming 38-6 to open, I thought, it's Wyoming. What do you expect? But since then, I think they have improved, and I think more than likely their defense is probably more legit than their offense.
Agreed, and I think this will be a really, really good defense that'll rank among the best State's played. Right? They're just solid. They're fundamental.
Sooner or later, Michigan State's got to run the ball better than what it has. And whether that's this year, next year, 2 years, whatever. Last year you get, there's no Kenneth Walker, and it shows. It absolutely shows.
Oh, it's glaring.
It's glaring. I mean, they couldn't run it against Michigan. If you can't run it, you're asking Thorne to do something that's one-dimensional, and occasionally he hit a couple passes against Michigan, but they scored 1 touchdown early in the game, and that was it for the night.
And let me ask you, though, when's the last time Michigan State did run the ball effectively, sans Kenneth Walker? I'll tell you, it was 2015. Seriously, it was that long ago. You know what else that was the last year for MSU? A good offensive line. That's the issue.
Well, Elijah Collins ran for 1,000 yards in his freshman year in 2019.
That's true, but he rolled up a lot of it in the non-conference, right? And then when they went up against the big boys, it didn't work out.
To a degree.
The offensive line has been non-existent for this program for a decade.
I would think they'd be up against a huge challenge today.
They are. Absolutely, they are.
That's got to be a big challenge.
We'll end this segment with this, because on the other side, we'll bring on Chris Solari, the MSU beat writer for the Detroit Free Press. We'll get a ground report on the weather from Champaign-Urbana, and also talk more Tunnelgate fallout, see what the latest is there.
He's the one that caused the problems in the tunnel.
He was literally in the middle of it.
He was bouncing off the walls with his phone.
Yeah, if you saw the Matt Charbonneau video, which just about everybody has that's listening to this, you could see in the lower right corner there was Solari right there. Because I asked him the next day, I said, "Chris, is that you?" Because I texted him the next day.
Against the wall.
And he said, "Yep, that was me smashed against the wall."
Maybe he was talking trash.
I doubt
he was
that.
talking trash to Charbonneau. It was a news versus Freep thing. All right, last thing before we go to break. We just hit on it. State can't run the ball. They haven't been able to in damn near a decade. Offensive line hasn't been good, hasn't been able to impose its will since the playoff year. Obviously an issue there. We knew coming into this year that the defense was a serious issue. It was last year. We hoped, and I guess kind of expected it to be not as bad, but maybe still not good. Well, it's worse. You could argue why. Thing is, we knew there were problems there, right? But what we thought we could control for was relying on MSU to at least score some points on offense because they've got dudes. There are players on offense, particularly at receiver. They've got 2 tight ends who appear to be massive mismatches, specifically Malik Carr. And Jay Johnson, the offensive coordinator, says that the MVP of his scheme is the tight end, and yet they don't throw to them. My point is, with all the guys they have on offense, they have talent there. They don't have that on defense. And yet this offense has maybe been a bigger disappointment than the defense, all things considered. What I'm getting at is the fan base sure it's got the crosshairs on the correct coordinator? Is Scotty Hazelton the one that has most disappointed this year? That's something we need to talk about as the season starts to wind down, but also food for thought, and it wouldn't be fair for me to bring up to not let you weigh in. So it looks like the hamster's running in the wheel, Tim. What do you got?
I just think at the end of the year, we had comp on the other day, and I said, would you be surprised if there were coaching changes at the end of the year? And what did he say, Brock? He said he wouldn't be surprised.
He wouldn't be surprised. He didn't speculate as to who, but he said there's a possibility there could be some coaching
I'm
changes.
not in on all those meetings, and I'm not in on the background and all that. For me to sit here as an expert and say change this guy, that guy, the next guy, I don't know. What I see is you need better players. That's what I do
but
see.
I'm not asking you who should be fired. I'm saying is the fan base, because the fan base decided in week 3 that Hazelton.
Hughes always asks me that question about the fan base, and I say, define the fan base. I mean, are we talking 75,000 in the stadium? Are we talking more than 1 million or 2 million on the TV? Are we talking students? Are we talking alums? Are we talking experts? Are we talking gamblers? Who are we talking as the fan base? And toward that end, I think there are 1 million different opinions out there, other than the fact that one thing they have all united is they're disappointed with the way the season's played out.
Will you play ball with me, damn it? The point I'm getting at is, however you want to define it, the vocal portion of the fan base that is always active in the narrative field.
I think they're more disappointed with a head coach.
But I agree, and it should be that way because the buck stops there, right? But I'm asking you, they've been zeroed in on Hazelton since week 3. That's been the story for the season. He's got to go. This defense isn't good enough, despite what you and I have talked about off and on. He's running the defense Tucker wants him to. But is that the guy? Is he more culpable for this year than the offensive coordinator? Because look how bad the offense has been, despite having more to work with than the defense.
You're assuming I'm an expert when you ask me that question.
You're on the Tailgate Show.
Ask Brock if I'm an expert.
You don't want to answer that?
Well,
it's political season.
He's not affirmative.
All right.
I think there's a lot of opinions that are across the board, other than the one collective agreement is they're disappointed with the players, the head coach, the coordinators, the cheerleaders, the officials, the breaks, the
Are
schedule.
you running for something on Tuesday? You will not answer the question. What is going on?
Because I can't define a fan base as a singular notion. That's a plural.
Wow.
But fight with him. He'll argue with you. He's more than willing to argue with you.
I'll come back and ask you Wednesday morning.
Ask Solari. He'll tell you anything you want to know.
Now that's why you're the dean. That is
a segue, yeah.
Coming up on the other side, Chris Solari, MSU beat writer for the Detroit Free Press on the ground in Champaign. Well, we'll see how bad the weather is there right now and pick his brain on the matchup and, of course, get the latest fallout from Tunnelgate because this thing just won't end. That's coming up in just a few minutes here on the Whitelaw PLLC Tailgate Show live from the Price Right RV Studios on 1240 WJIM Lansing's Big Talker and Classic Rock 94.9 MMQ.
Another travel update from the 1240 WJIM Traffic Center. Next, the Mel Tucker Show is back for another season on Lansing's Big Talker 1240 WJIM and Classic Rock 94.9 MMQ. Get up close and personal with the head coach of Michigan State football every Thursday night. Be there in person or just call in and ask the questions you want answered. The Mel Tucker Show on 1240 WJIM. Brought to you by Ameriprise Financial, Dart Bank, Dowding Industries Incorporated, Chupin & Sons Incorporated, Blue Moon Belgian White. The Mel Tucker Show on 1240 WJIM. It's time for another game day travel update from the 1240 WJIM Traffic Center. Driven by Shaheen Chevrolet and Cadillac. Relax and enjoy the Shaheen difference.
In Champaign, Illinois today for the big Michigan State-Illinois game. Mostly cloudy skies. Temperatures will be falling to about 50 degrees by 4 o'clock. Windy. Southwest winds 25 to 30 miles an hour. Gusts as high as 55 miles an hour. There is a wind advisory in effect in Champaign, Illinois. Whether that has an effect on the game or not, who the heck knows? But that's what the temperature is going to be. Mostly cloudy. Temperature will be falling to about 50 degrees once we get into the game. Here in East Lansing, there is a wind advisory until 8 o'clock tonight. Mostly cloudy, showers, temperature steady in the mid-60s. Winds out of the south, 20 to 25 miles an hour. Gusts as high as 50 miles an hour. Your weather update is brought to you by Shaheen Chevrolet and Cadillac. Relax and enjoy the Shaheen difference.
This is the Whitelaw PLLC Tailgate Show on Lansing's Big Talker, 1240 WJIM and Classic Rock 94.9 MMQ. Today's broadcast is brought to you by Whitelaw PLLC, Shaheen Chevrolet, Price Right Auto and RV, Blue Moon Belgian White. Now, let's talk to the Dean of Sports, Tim Staudt, and offensive-minded host, Beanie Howell from the Price Right Auto and RV Studios.
Welcome back to the Whitelaw PLLC Tailgate Show here on 1240 WJIM, Lansing's Big Talker, and Classic Rock 94.9 MMQ, live from the Price Right RV Studio, and also brought to you by Blue Moon Belgian White, Dart Bank Mortgage, Joe Sambear, Ameriprise Financial, Craig Stiles, DBI, We Do Office, High Caliber Karting and Entertainment, The Student Bookstore, The Nut House, and Gazelle Wealth Management. We're happy to have on the line now with us the MSU beat writer for the Detroit Free Press. He's Chris Solari, live from Champaign-Urbana, Illinois. How you doing today, Chris?
Somewhere near Champaign-Urbana, let's put it that way. It is, as the kids say, as the weathermen say, the wind will be a factor today, and it is a factor on my drive right now.
Well, tell us more, because the forecast is saying like sustained winds, 25 maybe to 40, with then gusts up to 50. Is that what you're experiencing as you drive into campus?
Yes, thankfully I got an SUV upgrade for my rental car, so it's pushing all over the place. I saw at least one or two semis that have been off the road, so the skies out to the west don't exactly look promising either. A little dark clouds, so I would assume that it's going to not be a great day to punt and probably not a great day to pass. And, you know, that kind of plays into Illinois' blueprint because they love to run the ball and control the clock.
For sure. Before we talk more about the matchup, it just seems like it won't end. We gotta touch on Tunnelgate. Chris Solari with us on the line, a Free Press beat writer covering MSU. He was literally in the middle of what happened, at least the first incident in the tunnel last week. He's written about it.
I don't know if it was the first. We don't know if it was the first incident or a continuation of a different incident.
Okay. Good reporting right there.
The hallway. Yes.
You can read his coverage of that at freep.com. It was in the paper, too. He wrote a firsthand account. I'm not going to ask you to rehash that, but we know, I guess with what happened there earlier in the week, we get ultimately 8 total suspensions. Several of those are significant contributors on defense, including starting linebacker Jacoby Wimman, Angelo Gross, who started at nickel, Zion Young, who played a lot at defensive end as a true freshman even last week. So some serious contributors out. And then the latest development, let's touch on this, Chris. So yesterday, some anonymous person on Twitter, none of us know, was circulating something that Malik Carr, the tight end for MSU, was jumped when he was trying to get on the team bus after the game. People were speculating if that's true. Why haven't we heard from State or Malik Carr on that? Then Malik Carr's mom tweets out that it's true, that when Malik was getting on the bus after all of that happened last week in Ann Arbor, as he's getting on the bus, a member of Jamon Green, one of the aggrieved Michigan players, a member of his family, and another Michigan anonymous, unnamed student athlete attempted to fight him. So that's where we are with it. What's the latest fallout? Is there anything else, or are we finally done with this story, you think?
Yeah, I had actually heard that on Sunday, that there was it's hard to call it an altercation because from what I heard from the source that I know that saw it, didn't actually see Malik Carr get jumped, but did know that there was something that happened, where the family member of Jamon Green tried to get to him. I also heard that Jamon Green's family member, Hop, was escorted out of the stadium previously and hopped a security barricade to get back inside. So it kind of goes further to what we were talking about earlier last week about you can't have security as window dressing, which I think is exactly what we saw in the incident. That the fact that the two players were in the tunnel with the Michigan State team, and then everything that transpired within the tunnel itself. It's a failure on every end, from the tunnel all the way back to the back gate. But it wasn't like the bus was right up against the gate. So I think it's, I saw that, and I was traveling yesterday, so I didn't get to jump in too much on this. But I saw that Jamon Green's attorney had mentioned something about it being his brother that was involved in it as the anonymous student athlete. And I know his brother, if you watch the video from ABC, after he was told of what happened, tried to get into the Michigan State locker room and was restrained there. And that's from what I understood from the source that I know that saw it, that there was, they did not see the physical altercation between whoever it was with the car, but they also said that police were in the middle and restraining it. So, this is something that you can sit there and rely on the parties and just say yes or no, but ultimately it's up to the police report to include this on top of everything else, even if it's sensitive. Mel Tucker talked about it. He said there are incidents that are being investigated, so I would assume this is one of them.
For sure. So let's talk about it as it pertains to the game, because again, 8 guys suspended in it. By my count, at least half of them, 4 of them, played and contributed significantly, particularly on defense for Michigan State. The implications of that today, and I guess the rest of the season, what do you think it is?
Well, I guess it depends on how long these suspensions last. I mean, we're probably not going to know, at least until a police report. From what I understand, the Big Ten is also hamstrung in what they can do right now, both from the criminal investigation that's going on and then with the civil situation with Jamon Green hiring an attorney. So that's kind of why you haven't heard Big Ten weigh in on it yet. But, this is, I think, the big thing that I've heard people, on both sides saying that Michigan State did a really good thing by suspending these guys, and I agree with that. But I've also heard some people say that they were acquiescing in some ways to their rival. But the reality is you've got a former police officer running the athletic department at Michigan State. He understands how criminal investigations work and operate. So I think that's where you look at the action that was taken. I give a lot of credit to Alan Haller as much as Mel Tucker for that. But from a football standpoint, I mean, you lose 3 starters. I think Zion Young had blossomed into a defensive end starter with all the injuries that they've had at that position, without Petrosky, without Bogle. Now you lose that. You lose the ability to have Jacoby Windman come and play down to help at that spot. And then you've also had Van Sumeren out for the Michigan game, so that's 2 linebackers now that are down. And then Angelo Gross, he might have been replaced by Justin White, but he was involved in that situation and suspended too. So, I mean, it's not just the 3 starters, but it's some significant depth on that defense, and particularly the front 7 that really needs it to try and stop the run today with the conditions, with Chase Brown, with the way that Illinois likes to run the clock. You lose Zion Young, you lose Brandon Wright, you lose Jacoby Windman. That's a lot up front on top of the injuries. Maybe Petrosky comes back, but what percentage is he at as well? So there's a lot of things conspiring against Michigan State right now, from the injuries and the suspension.
Talking with Chris Solari, MSU beat writer for the Detroit Free Press. I don't know if you heard it this week, but Tim talked to Lynn Henning, a longtime columnist for the Detroit News, and has covered Michigan State and virtually everything in the state for as long as Tim. And I wonder what you think of his take. His take was what happened in the tunnel was more akin to a fight on the field than any kind of jumping or anything that deserves a criminal investigation. And his bigger takeaway was that tunnel is a serious liability now, and that someone has to get involved if Michigan won't, like the Big Ten, to have some sort of regulation as to who can be there and when. Now, since you were literally in the middle of it, what's your assessment of that? Like, does this need intervention from an authority, a higher authority, to regulate that tunnel?
Well, first, I think you start with the two incidents that we saw. The one that I saw was akin to every football fight I've ever seen on a field, except one player didn't have their helmet on. The Michigan player who went into the tunnel ahead of his team with his helmet in his hand into the Michigan State team. That was McMurrow's. I've seen that fight on football fields before many times. The difference, I think, we've even in the last few years seen helmet swinging. Whatever precipitated that, I've heard some rumors that, I think I told you this. I mean, I've heard two rumors that one that Green started it with a punch and one that he swung his helmet. So it changes a lot depending on what ends up coming out of that, which may end up just being a he said, she said situation. But specifically that, but we've seen that. We've seen helmets swung on the field, which isn't right, but, we've seen it on the field. What makes this different is that you're bracketed by two cement concrete walls. Right? I mean, there's no escape for whenever something like this happens. That's, I think, the big problem. And yes, I think Lynn had talked about it. I mean, there are three trigger times that are a problem: before kickoff, halftime, and at the end of the game. So security should be well aware and in place to prevent the teams from intermingling in those situations. That didn't happen. Then on top of that, there's a couple different flashpoints. You've got teams that are coming in from an emotional situation, and you've got locker rooms that are, I'm talking like feet away from each other across the hallway looking at it. So for when Jamon Green's brother found that out and tried to go into the Michigan State locker room, if there weren't a crowd of people there, it wouldn't have taken much. He was restrained by people, and I don't believe it was security that restrained him. So that's problematic. So many different ways. I don't know what the answer to, at least to the situation you saw with people sneaking in from the other team into the other team leaving. You got to put the police right down at the bottom of that tunnel, right behind whichever team goes up first. That's got to happen, plain and simple. Whatever that takes, that needs to happen.
Talking with Chris Solari, he covers MSU for the Detroit Free Press. A few more minutes here. All right, I'm sure you're ready to talk about actual football. So what I'm wondering is the fallout from that and the impact it's going to have on player availability. Will that eliminate State's ability to deploy that new 4-3 alignment that has worked pretty well for it the last couple of weeks? The defense making huge strides playing this 4-3 alignment against more ground-oriented teams, and they're going up against another one, a third straight such opponent tonight or this afternoon. Will they be able to play that, you think?
Well, they played a decent amount of 4-2-5 in that Michigan game as well, so I think they were able to blend it. But obviously, you don't have Windman. It depends on Van Summeren's availability. If Van Summeren's out, now you got basically Cal Halliday and Aaron Brule at linebacker with Carson Castile, who I don't believe has played a snap in meaningful minutes for the defense. He's been on some special teams units. And then Sam Edwards, the walk-on from Williamston. Now, barring position changes, there's not a lot. With Darius Snow out since the beginning of the season, that's limited in some ways. That in the depth that they had is really being tested. I don't know how much they're going to be able to play it, but you could see a freshman getting in there that's maybe made some strides that we haven't seen yet. You could see one of the defensive backs moving into more of a linebacker role. The problem is, though, the logical candidate for that probably would have been Angelo Gross. So. It's going to be maybe probably the biggest test that Scotty Hazelton has had, and he's had a lot of them. in the last 3 seasons. But, when you have this limited of personnel between the injuries and the suspensions, they got to get a little creative to try and shut down a guy who's leading the nation 151 yards a game on the ground.
Chris, this is Tim. I didn't see your score in the paper. What is your score in the paper and your rationale for making your prediction today?
Oh, gosh. Now you're going to test me while I'm driving. Give me a second, and I will figure that out. But I have somewhere in the 31 to 13 range. With this weather, it might be a little lower scoring than that. So, yeah, I mean, I think today this is one of those games that really plays into Illinois' hands, and I think the problem that Michigan State's had in the last 5 weeks is they've given up a lot of yards. Talk about the run defense being a strength, but, I mean, they've given up 5 straight 100-yard rushers, and now they face the nation's top running back in a depleted form on their defense. So, I anticipate this to be similar in nature to the Minnesota game and kind of how the second half went with Michigan, just eating clock, running the ball on the ground, keeping the clock going, and punching it in at the end. Then I think the difference between last week and this week, they were able to knock down some of those deep drives that Michigan had and turn them into field goals. I'm not necessarily sure without Windman, without Gross, without Zion Young, if they'll be able to do that this week.
Your pick in the paper, I just found it was 28-7. Basically, same story.
I had juggled that a little bit. I think the weather. I think when I saw there was going to be some weather, I ducked the score down a little bit.
All right. Well, hey, thanks for making time for us here on the White Law PLLC Tailgate Show. We'll do it again. Thanks, Chris.
All right. Be well, guys.
It's Chris Solari, MSU beat writer for the Detroit Free Press. Yeah, I'm with him. It just seems like it's going to be a lot like that Minnesota game. Some very long, plodding, scoring drives. So it's going to be death by 1,000 cuts kind of situation because they just won't be able to stop them on the ground. That's what I suspect will happen. And by the time we look up, it could be a 4-touchdown differential and just feel like it was a really boring game because they're just running the ball nonstop effectively. Although Minnesota was able to come out and throw it a little bit too, much to State's surprise. So maybe Illinois is looking at that film and thinking that's where they
Do you think Northwestern can hang on and beat Ohio State today?
I don't. We'll talk about that on the other side.
Maybe Ohio State will rally.
We'll do a whole top 25 scoreboard catch-up as well as Big Ten action. Not in the top 25 going on right now. Catch up on that in just a couple minutes when we come back on the other side. And also, Tim will give you the defensive keys to today's game, MSU at Illinois, coming up here at 3:30. You can hear it here on 1240 WJIM and Classic Rock 94.9 MMQ. Get to more of that. Again, top 25 Big Ten scoreboard in just a few minutes when we come back from this break here on the White Law PLLC Tailgate Show.
Back with more of the White Law PLLC Tailgate Show on 1240 WJIM and 94.9 MMQ in less than 60 seconds. It's time for another game day travel update from the 1240 WJIM Traffic Center. Driven by Shaheen Chevrolet and Cadillac. Relax and enjoy the Shaheen difference.
Yes, let's take a look at the weather in Champaign, Illinois. There is a rain likely right now. It's raining right now, mostly cloudy. Then gradually becoming mostly sunny by the time we get to game time. Temperatures will be falling throughout the day to around 50 degrees by 5 o'clock. Winds out of the southwest, 20 to 25 miles an hour. Gusts as high as 50 miles an hour. There's a high wind warning in that area right now, but during game time there will be a wind advisory. Right now, though, it's 63 degrees in Champaign. Here in East Lansing, there's a wind advisory until 8 o'clock tonight. Mostly cloudy skies, showers, temperature steady, right around 65 degrees. Winds out of the south, 20 to 25 miles an hour, gusting as high as 50 miles an hour. It's 61 degrees right now in EL. Your weather update is brought to you by Shaheen Chevrolet and Cadillac. Relax and enjoy the Shaheen difference.
This is the White Law PLLC Tailgate Show on Lansing's Big Talker, 1240 WJIM and Classic Rock 94.9 MMQ. Today's broadcast is brought to you by White Law PLLC, Shaheen Chevrolet, Price Right Auto and RV, Blue Moon Belgian Wine. Now, let's talk to the Dean of Sports, Tim Staudt, and offensive-minded host, Beanie Howell from the Price Right Auto and RV Studios.
And we're back. White Law PLLC Tailgate Show, 1240 WJIM, Lansing's Big Talker, and Classic Rock 94.9 MMQ, live at the Price Right RV Studio, and also brought to you by Blue Moon Belgian White, Shaheen Chevrolet and Cadillac, MSU Healthcare Sports Medicine, Doubting Industries, Schupan & Sons Recycling Industrial Services, Gravity Smokehouse, and MSU Federal Credit Union. Let's take a look around the nation at the top 25 action going on right now, the one that's perhaps most captivating, and it has certainly got all of Tim Staudt's attention. We're at the end of the first quarter in Evanston, and Northwestern ahead of Ohio State 7-0, and knocking on the door again. They're at the Ohio State 27. Really impressive, Tim, when you consider it's a road game for Northwestern in their own backyard.
As everybody knows, you can't stop the Cats. You can only hope to contain them. And Ohio State, I saw the score that Northwestern, the guy ran like 15 yards on and they blocked. The weather's an issue there. And Ohio State, from what I've seen off the monitor, has struggled offensively in the weather. But nonetheless, it's Northwestern 7, Ohio State nothing, and it looks like a Northwestern road game at Ryan Field because they actually have people in the end zones despite the weather, and of course they're all wearing red.
As is tradition, every Big Ten opponent with any kind of fan base comes in there and takes over. It's got to be hard to play home games for Northwestern.
Is Michigan rooting for Northwestern or Ohio State? Or do they want Ohio State 11-0 and be a Michigan underdog going to Columbus?
I think it's a victory either way. Is that fair to say? Michigan fans would feel good about it either way?
Maybe.
It doesn't really change anything for them. Like, if they win all their games, they're in, right?
Well, ask Wally Wolverine in there. What does he want? Does he want North Ohio State to have a loss today?
It doesn't really affect anything because if Ohio State beats Michigan, they're still going to go to the Big Ten title game.
Right, and I think Michigan fans would be worried about, stirring up the hornet's nest a little bit. They're
already going to run into that anyway. It may not make any difference because Ohio State remembers what happened last year in bad weather. Remember, it snowed in Ann Arbor that day.
Let's move on to the Big 12. Or did you have more on that, Tim?
Well, no, Northwestern's in field goal territory right now anyway, so if they don't get a touchdown in here, and if I don't know where the wind is there, but they are in field goal. They're on the Ohio State 23-yard line.
3rd and 6. We'll keep tabs on that. Moving to the Big 12 and also staying in the top 10, the team that I think is most jobbed in the initial college football playoff rankings, if you care about that, and really we shouldn't, it's an exercise in futility. None of these rankings matter until the last one. This is all a marketing ploy to get us to talk about it. And look, it's working hook, line, and sinker.
You're sounding like Tim.
That's exactly
anyway,
right.
The number 7 Texas Christian Horned Frogs locked up at 10. They're playing at home against Texas Tech. It is just underway the second quarter, it looks like. Here's why I am with Texas Christian.
It's 10-10, by the way.
What did I say?
You didn't say the score.
Oh, sorry.
It's 10-10.
I thought I said locked up at 10.
But they're a great fourth-quarter team and have been all year. They win all their games in the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
Which should matter for something. But listen, if we're going to be serious about these rankings and what the CFP committee is supposed to base it on, which they list on their website, the criteria they say they look at, I don't see how TCU is anything lower than 3rd, or where they should be, because they check every single box, and they're 4-0 against the AP Top 25. Teams ahead of them like Ohio State and Michigan are only 1-0 each against the AP Top 25. That should count for something.
Brock and I are much simpler. If you're a Power 5 team and you're undefeated, you're in. Simple as that. If there are 5 Power 5 teams, then one obviously gets left out. If you got 4 undefeated teams, which you won't have, from each of the Power 5s, they're in. Otherwise, the criticism of that system would be through the roof, beyond what it already is now.
I like what Mike DeCourcy said this week after the initial rankings.
Mike DeCourcy of the Sporting News.
He said, until there's automatic qualifiers for winning your conference, it is not a playoff, it's an invitational.
Yeah, well, that's true.
He's right. He's
totally
right.
Agree. He's a
but
smart
I
man.
don't think he's the only one that thought of that.
We're getting to that point, though, right?
That's why you have that's why you have a committee. And to your point, to me, all of those weekly ranking things, and my mother can figure it out. And the top 7 there will all be in because they play their way in with the teams they have coming up.
They play each other.
Georgia and Tennessee.
Yeah.
Right.
The winner will probably play Alabama.
Ohio State and Michigan are going to play. That'll take care of that.
Yep.
Also, for Michigan fans, the Michigan fans were super upset about Clemson being ahead of them. And
I'm not.
I can
It'll take care of itself.
Exactly. I could understand why, because Clemson has not looked impressive. 4 of their 7 wins are by, a combined 28 points. I get it. But also, for the Michigan fan, a couple of things. One, play someone with a pulse in the non-conference. That's certainly what's hurting them in the rankings.
No question, and it should get criticized.
And number 2, don't worry about it. If Clemson's as big a fraud as you say they are,
well, I don't
that's
know
going to get taken care of tonight in South Bend.
No, I think there's some that say they're not worthy of their record with the schedule they've played, but they can prove it either side moving forward.
Yeah, and folks, if Michigan has the 0 in the loss column, if they are 13-0 and Big Ten champions, they are going to be in the playoffs.
Yeah.
So just keep winning.
But my question is, as I've said to him all week, what I want to know, if Michigan loses a close game to Ohio State and finishes 11-1, can Michigan still get in?
I think that would depend on what happens in front of them.
No
right?
question.
Fair.
So possible. I think it's more likely to get 2 SEC teams in, and there's precedence for that.
Yes.
But even if they do, if everybody else around them's got 1 loss, then they're in the discussion. Then they're in the invitational stage. Then they're in the argument stage.
Then Michigan's non-conference is really going to come back to haunt them.
Yes.
If you're in that boat.
Yes.
But again,
does a 12-1 Oregon team Pac-12 champ get in?
I don't know about that. I think they're probably more behind the 8 ball than anyone else, even the Big 12, because of the lack of writers watching them as much because of the time difference.
Well, and the one time they saw them nationally, they got destroyed by Georgia.
Exactly.
But Oregon's played great since then.
But also look what happened every time the Pac-12 gets into the playoff. They get chased out eventually by an SEC team, and it's ugly. So that goes against them too. Should it? No, that's not what they're supposed to do. But again, I'm more hung up on TCU because look at TCU, 8-0, 4 wins against the AP Top 25. If their name was Oklahoma, do you think they would be number 7? In the college football playoff rankings?
Probably not.
I think they would be probably number 3, maybe even number 2.
I don't know, but all you guys gripe about how Iowa can't score and they're blowing out Purdue at Lafayette 14-0. So there's that, and then
that is a blowout.
They're winning 14-0
Purdue's a second half team, though, Tim.
They better be. And Wisconsin is ahead of Maryland 14-0, and that's in Madison. And the weather, well, I don't know what the weather's like at Purdue, but at Wisconsin it's bad too.
Let's keep moving along in the top 25 ACC country, where number 17 North Carolina trails at Virginia 7-3 halfway through the second quarter. Moving on, number 19 Tulane up 10-3 at Tulsa in the second quarter. Now that's the kind of game Tim Stout's interested in.
I refuse to say that Tulane is a top 20 team.
Did you?
They're in position to get that New Year's 6 bowl bid right now.
I'm just
for the non-Power 5.
My stereotype prejudice and old school.
Well, at least you're honest.
Well,
about
how would you
Tim.
handle them in the playoff then? Once it expands,
that wouldn't be handled. They'd be playing in the Motor City Bowl against Ball State.
What about like Cincinnati last year?
Cincinnati belonged last year.
They got crushed.
They kept that game closer than I thought. Remember, it was only like 3 touchdowns late in the fourth quarter.
Well, I mean, this is where the invitational issues come up because everybody has their own personal opinion. I go by the eyeball test. If I was on that committee, I'd throw all those guys' stats out, and I'd just say, that team right there is one of the best 4. That team isn't. That team is.
Well, here's the thing. That's what they do.
They say that.
No. They say they go by the criteria, but they do what you're doing. You scumbag.
Well, I mean, are you looking for the best resume, or are you looking for the eyeball test of what you think when you watch football, these are the 4 best teams, or that team is not one of the 4 best?
They say that what they are obligated to do by the statute, and what they do, they say, which isn't true, is go by the resume.
So, therefore, how do you analyze Oregon? If Oregon finishes undefeated with a 49-3 loss, do you go by Oregon in the first game of the year or the last game of the year?
Here's what I would do. I would consider it all and think, that was our first game of the season, playing at Georgia, essentially, in Atlanta, in a banner game, hanging a banner situation. Also, it was the first game for a new quarterback, first game for a new coach under a new offense. By the way, the new coach was Georgia's defensive coordinator.
Dan Lanning. Yeah,
you have to give them credit for improving. By the way, I don't think they're bad. They've rolled everyone they've played.
What I've argued with him for years is college football should take the mid-majors and give them their own national championship, just like the high schools
In other words, create a 4th division, because there's already one AA right now, or
I mean,
FCS.
like everybody in Ione says, they're the same 7 teams play for it every year. All right, so that means the mid. You think the MAC has a chance to play in the Final Four? Come on.
I don't. But here's what I would do. That's what I think the committee should do. The Power 5 winners should be automatic qualifiers, and I think we're eventually going to get to that stage. I don't know how long it'll take.
When it gets to 12.
Yeah, I think
whether it's 2026 or sooner.
Happen if it gets to 12.
Right. I think it's coming. The committee can figure out the rest. They can figure out the at-larges from the Power 5 and then those guys, the mid-majors. Let them figure that out. But the problem with college football throughout history, and this is the issue, college football's history lends itself to writers deciding things in editorial and in editors' rooms and in newsrooms, right? Deciding things on paper. I thought the point was to play the damn games. Like basketball figured this out 40 years ago.
But see, I agree with the theory that if you go to 12 and you seed these teams, do you think that 9, 10, 11, and 12, those seeds are going to win one game, especially if they go on the road in the first round?
Yes,
every one of them is going to get beat.
I think we will see it, though. Just the same way we eventually saw a 16 beat a 1 in the NCAA tournament.
Don't get me wrong. I don't necessarily have the answers to all this thing. I do hope the Bulls...
Seems like you do, Tim.
I think the system, currently the way it is, probably identifies the national champion as well. And I think when you had the BCS with the top two, generally speaking, the two best teams played for the title, generally speaking. And that kept the New Year's Six bowl games as something that mattered. Now you lose your way into the Rose Bowl instead of winning your way into the Rose Bowl. The consolation prize for the Ohio State-Michigan loser likely will be going to the Rose Bowl.
Likely.
That depends, though, right? It could be the loser of whoever is sacrificed to Ohio State in the Big Ten title game, depending.
Could be
what
Illinois.
if it's Illinois?
Could be Illinois.
Yeah, I don't know. But the point is, I thought we were supposed to let it be determined on the field. And I know that's not college football's legacy, because for eons, it was decided by writers
and coaches.
In newsrooms.
And
coaches.
coaches.
And coaches, too.
Right.
What about the result?
Well, that would take leadership from the NCAA to create an NCAA Division I football tournament, because of the 90 sports that the NCAA sponsors, there's only one that they don't sponsor, a postseason tournament.
But that's what the playoff is.
Can we all
Division
agree
I
that
football.
The current bowl system is completely the players don't want to play. The top,
unless it's a playoff.
The top players don't want to play in the bowls.
I think, though, if we get to a larger playoff, you solve issues of guys opting out of those games to protect their draft stock.
I'd like to see it eventually get to 16
Me too.
It
seems natural.
And we're going to get there eventually.
But I just don't see how come. Well, hold on.
People are talking about Michigan State going to bowl. They've had a terrible year. Why is that a big deal in the first place?
It's a big deal to me because you get 20 more practices. That's why. That's it. 20 more practices. That's what it matters for a team like that. But think about it, man. Like, we're hurtling toward a reality where we could get college football to have a 16-team playoff, which we've been told for generations isn't feasible, and at the same time they've done it at every other level of college football, just not at the top.
That's my point.
Yeah,
it's about money.
Yeah, but
it's the damn TV networks.
The mid-majors don't have that. They don't have the Division I mid-majors are not playing for the national championship. You can just be practical.
They're not in college basketball either, and it still delivers excellent matchups. They never win it. When's the last time a mid-major
That's my
won?
point.
Villanova, when they were a mid-major in the 80s.
So why not give them their own football championship that matters?
Because
and
I think
a national champion.
You would have to create another division.
Because,
like I said,
for one, I think they would prefer to never win it and to have a shot at winning the real thing, but never winning it.
Either create a fourth division or have them drop down to FCS.
Anyway, Tim, why don't you deliver us the defensive keys before we get out for this hour?
Are you going to argue over the defensive keys?
Depends on how out of touch you are with your takes.
The one thing we won't argue is that the defensive keys for this afternoon's Michigan State-Illinois game are brought to you by Gazelle Wealth Management. Well, it's a little bit of an abstract thought here when you're missing 8 defensive players, all of whom were on the travel roster to play on the road at Michigan. So all of those guys were taken on the road in case they were needed to play. They weren't just like they were the 115th players on the roster who dressed for a home game. They were on the travel roster. So how obviously Michigan State has been able to jury-rig a defensive group together, not only on defense but special teams as well, and the depth chart to me me, obviously, is a huge factor today. I think the weather's going to have to figure out a way to help Michigan State if its defense is going to play well. Can it get a takeaway? Can it get a break? Can it get a break from the weather? To me, the defensive keys are what are the intangibles that you have not seen so far, because arguably two of your best defensive players who are starters are out. And look, you're going to obviously have to keep an eye on Chase Brown, the running back. They try to keep an eye on Blake Corum with all those guys playing, and he only hit him for 177 yards. It's a long shot, obviously, for the defense to play well enough to win today, but they're not on the field trying to lose. Whoever the 11 are out there, play as hard as you can, do what you're told, see if you can make plays, and don't take stupid penalties like Michigan State's offensive lineman did early in the game in Ann Arbor. The defensive keys, for whatever they're worth, have been brought to you by Gazelle Wealth Management. Gazelle takes a long-term view using prudent risk management. You can call Joe Gazelle today. He's at 336-7200, or visit Gazelle Wealth Management online at gazellewealth.com. That's Gazall Wealth. And I assume you can spell wealth, WEALTH.com.
Thanks for that, Tim.
There you go.
We're about to get out. Let me give you an update from Evanston. Northwestern failed to score and, in fact, punted, although they were on Ohio State's 30-something yard line. Ohio State got the ball 3 and out. They've had the ball 5 times, the Buckeyes have. 4 punts, 1 turnover on downs, 3 and outs. Has that happened at all this year?
Fire Ryan Day.
7-0 Northwestern midway through the second quarter. We can continue to monitor that for you. We're back in a couple of minutes. Reset the talking points about MSU at Illinois today. And after that, a little bit after that, it's Mad Dog's take on the game with David Mad Dog DeMarco. A ton more coming your way here today for another hour. Whitelaw PLLC Tailgate Show, live from the Price Right RV Studios on 1240 WJIM, Lansing's Big Talker and Classic Rock 94.9 MMQ.
Lansing's Big Talker, 1240 WJIM Lansing, and Classic Rock 94.9 WMMQ East Lansing, Town Square Media Station. As another travel update from the 1240 WJIM Traffic Center. Next, the Mel Tucker Show is back for another season on Lansing's Big Talker, 1240 WJIM, and Classic Rock 94.9 MMQ. Get up close and personal with the head coach of Michigan State football every Thursday night. Be there in person or just call in and ask the questions you want answered. The Mel Tucker Show on 1240 WJIM. Brought to you by Ameriprise Financial, Dark Bank, Dowding Industries Incorporated, Chupin & Sons Incorporated, Blue Moon Belgian White. The Mel Tucker Show on 1240 WJIM. It's time for another game day travel update from the 1240 WJIM Traffic Center. Driven by Shaheen Chevrolet and Cadillac. Relax and enjoy the Shaheen difference.
Taking a look at your weather once again, 64 degrees, overcast and windy in Champaign, Illinois. There is a wind advisory until 8 o'clock tonight. Mostly cloudy skies, but it's gradually going to become sunny. Temperatures will be falling to about 50 degrees by the time we get to about halftime. The wind will be a factor. Winds out of the southwest, 20 to 30 miles an hour, gusting as high as 50 miles an hour. Right now, 64 degrees and overcast. Very windy in Champaign. Here in East Lansing, there's a wind advisory until 8 p.m. tonight. Showers possible, temperature steady right in the mid-60s. Winds out of the south 20 to 25 miles an hour, gusting as high as 50 miles an hour. Right now, it's 61 degrees, mostly cloudy, rain, and wind. Your weather update is brought to you by Shaheen Chevrolet and Cadillac. Relax and enjoy the Shaheen difference.
This is the Whitelaw PLLC Tailgate Show on Lansing's Big Talker, 1240 WJIM, Classic Rock 94.9 MMQ, and special game day edition of The Game, 7:30 a.m. Today's broadcast is brought to you by Whitelaw PLLC, Shaheen Chevrolet, Price Right Auto and RV, Blue Moon Belgian White. Now, let's talk to the Dean of Sports, Tim Staudt, and offensive-minded host, Beanie Howell, from the Price Right Auto and RV Studios.
Welcome back, Whitelaw PLLC Tailgate Show here on 1240 WJIM, Lansing's Big Talker and Classic Rock 94.9 MMQ, live from the Price Right RV Studio, taking you up to 2 o'clock when the Spartan Media Network pregame coverage takes over on both of these stations, and they'll take you up to kickoff at 3:30, MSU at Illinois. Whitelaw PLLC Tailgate Show also brought to you by Blue Moon Belgian White, Dart Bank Mortgage Joe Sambear, Ameriprise Financial Craig Stiles, DBI We Do Office, High Caliber Karting and Entertainment, The Student Bookstore, The Nut House, and Gazelle Wealth Management. Programming note for fans of Classic Rock 94.9 MMQ's Saturday night tradition, All Request Saturday night, that will start as scheduled at 7 o'clock on the digital stream. So through the website, the MMQ app, whatever your streaming device is, smart speaker, the linear signal over the air will be joined in progress once postgame coverage of MSU at Illinois ends here tonight, whenever that may be. Okay? All right. So we are about 2.5 hours from kickoff. Michigan State at Illinois. We know what's on the line today. If MSU loses to Illinois, who, by the way, it's not like it would be a shame. Illinois has been solid this year and 7-1 and a hair from being 8-0, like we talked about. That would leave the Spartans at 3-6 with no margin for error if they want a postseason. They would have to win all three of their remaining games: home versus Rutgers, home versus Indiana, and at Penn State.
That's to get them to play a Mid-American Conference team at Ford Field December 26th.
But I think, honestly, it's more about the 20 extra practices. Coaches want that because in-state has a lot of young guys playing. It's a young program, right, for the most part.
Yeah, that means nothing to me. Never has. Brock disagrees with me, but it's never meant a thing.
I think it's important. It's interesting. Chris Solari said possibly Sam Edwards, who was a star at Lansing Catholic on their state title team in 2019. He would be, a redshirt sophomore, might be part of the playing group now. That was surprising to hear that. But with all the guys that are out, that's a possibility now.
Yep, that's the situation. Well, we talked
There's
about...
going to be guys on the dress list that we've never heard of before.
With the games they have left, to me, this isn't even a discussion until or unless they beat Illinois today. Because if they win today, then you can say, well, you can make a case they'll beat Rutgers and Indiana at home. That gets them a winning record. That gets them bowl eligible. Winning at Penn State then would be something that would get them beyond Ford Field to something that's more Big Ten manageable.
Since when in sports radio do we wait for something to happen to talk and speculate about it?
Well, that's why I said to him all week, the Illinois game has value for Michigan State to win. Because the next two games are winnable games.
Sure.
You would be going to Penn State ostensibly with a 3-game winning streak. You would have a winning record, right? Now, you're going to be an underdog of Penn State regardless, and you might not win there. But what if you did? And you went 4-0 in November?
Let me ask you this.
Providing you have to win today, of course.
Let me ask you this. Since it's interesting, you're saying we shouldn't talk about it until it happens, but you're a king of hypotheticals. What a walking hypocrisy, Tim Staudt.
Well, I mean, I'm saying what's going to happen, win or lose. If it's a loss, then do you just play the last 3 games?
Let me ask you this.
If they win today, those next 2 home games mean something.
If you lose today, it still might. Because there is precedence for a 5-7 team getting into a bowl game.
Ask Brock that's an embarrassment to me. That just solidifies the fact that the bowl system is a joke.
But getting in at 6-6 is embarrassing too.
Well, the Mid-American Conference matchup that's a reward for the season you had. When usually you play that at the front end so that you get an automatic win, which they did twice with Western and Akron. Now, if they did play a MAC team at Ford Field in the Quick Lane Bowl,
could be Eastern Michigan.
Could finish 3-0 in the MAC and say they're MAC champs.
Or you could lose to a MAC team.
Well, then they're 2-1.
And what a nasty taste in your mouth to end the season.
With a losing record.
And to a MAC school.
How do you think the crowd...
That's not the point, though. It's not a reward anymore. It hasn't been any time recently. Bowl games are not a big deal.
That's what the advertisement is.
Well, but we all know that's dishonest, right? It's not. It's what it's really about, and everyone in this room knows it, and everyone listening knows it's about TV viewership and advertising revenue.
Well, and
that's what it's about. And so that's why, the reward for a bowl game is not the bowl game. Again, the program benefits more from the 20 extra practices.
But you're a younger generation, and I think the generation of people who buy the tickets and watch college football are a lot of people who remember the bowl system as being far more than what it was. If you ask Ianni, he'll tell you the greatest bowl experience by far is playing in a Rose Bowl, which I totally agree. Now, I understand that if it's not part of the Final Four, well, then nationally it's not going to have the same weight that goes with it. But the Rose Bowl sells out 100,000 every single year, no matter who plays in it. The Big Ten's been a part of it as the granddaddy.
Except when UCLA plays the home game there. Then you get maybe 5,000.
But that's different.
It is. But that's my point. It's different now. That's why, like, bowl games don't matter. We're not in the 60s anymore when you could only go to a Rose Bowl once,
Well,
and then you couldn't even go the next year if you won it all
you
again.
don't take a 5-7 team if you're short just because of their name. You take it because academically, and I have no idea where all these guys are.
And that's only if you don't. And that's only if you don't fill out the bowls with all the 6-6 teams.
Right.
Well, but hey, there's also precedence for 6-6 teams to say no thank you to a bowl game, and that opens up some spots. Notre Dame has done that in the past. It's beneath them to play in the Hawaii Bowl, things like that.
Although they have played in the Hawaii Bowl before.
Yeah,
when Jimmy Clausen was the
What was
quarterback.
the year they declined it? There was a bowl where they got in at 6-6 and said, "No, this is."
Oh,
not.
I think it was the last year. No, what happened?
Charlie Weiss, wasn't
Don't
it?
they need the 20 practices?
They do, but it's Notre Dame. They have appearances to keep up.
But the thing is, I think it was the last year of Lou Holtz. They lost to USC last game of the season. They finished, I think, 9-3 or 8-4. Did not finish in the BCS and didn't get any of the at-large bids, so they just declined a bowl and didn't go.
I was talking about more recently in 2009.
Okay.
They declined a bowl invite at a 6-6 record.
Okay.
It was after they fired Charlie Weiss, so they didn't have a coach.
But you're aware that the Big Ten has contracted.
Yes.
What is it, Brock?
I think it's 9 or 10 bowls.
It's 9 or 10 bowls they're contracted. There's no below because that's how you get paid.
Yes. Again, that's what this is all about.
Yeah,
that bowl, by the way, that Notre Dame said no thanks to in 2009, the Insight.com Bowl.
Which is in Arizona.
That was a big one.
Which is in Arizona.
I mean,
yeah.
I always circle my calendar.
What's that called now?
I think it's just the Arizona Bowl that they didn't play last year because Central Michigan was supposed to play in it.
Insight.com disappeared.
Yeah.
Elon Musk bought it.
Was there ever an Enron Bowl? Maybe the state could go to that.
Well, it would have been in Houston, and remember, Minute Maid Park was named Enron Stadium before they ran into problems.
All right, let me catch you up real quick, Tim. I know you are captivated by what's going on in Evanston.
First of all, they showed a picture of the weather there, and those trees look like they were almost like in Florida during a hurricane. If that's the case in Evanston, what's it going to be like in Champaign? Because obviously that weather has played a huge factor. Because if you'd have told me that Northwestern could go to halftime leading Ohio State, and they're a 37.5-point dog, I think Ohio State's going to have a hard time covering today. But that weather's been a massive factor. So if it's that way in Champaign, now football teams don't look like the football teams you've seen previously. And Ohio State proves it.
5:21 left in the first half. It's still 7-0 Northwestern. Listen, to some of the numbers are just mind-numbing. C.J. Stroud. Can we agree if he's not the leader for the Heisman, he's certainly in the top two? He's 6 for 16 with 46 yards.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, it's that kind of day. Obviously, the weather playing a huge role in it. But then this. Tim, I'm being serious when I ask you this. When's the last time Ohio State punted 4 times in a game, let alone in the first half?
Well, it wasn't against Northwestern. But I'm being serious too. If that, I don't know. Champagne's what, Brock, 150 miles south. If the weather's, they've been showing the wind on the trees and the flags. I mean, it's unreal. I can only imagine what those airplanes landing at O'Hare nearby must be going through, trying to land smoothly.
It's bad when it's good out there landing at O'Hare.
Yeah.
You been there recently? I had a flight come in a couple months ago, and I almost barfed my brains out. And it was like bright and sunny. Well, what is it about that place?
That's why I take the train to go to Chicago.
Well, I was coming back from Mexico.
Oh, well,
I couldn't take a train.
You don't have that option.
I couldn't take a train. If I could, well, never mind. That wouldn't be an appropriate
Let's
joke.
not go there.
All right, but let's go here. Let's take a timeout. Because
since you asked me, let me send you to timeout with this.
Whoa.
If Northwestern wins today, name me the last time there'd been a bigger upset in college football of a 37-point underdog.
30, I don't know.
I don't either.
I thought you were going to say the last time Ohio State got upset this bad, and I think it would probably be Purdue a couple years ago on the road.
Or Iowa on the road.
Yeah, or remember when Juice Williams in Illinois beat them in the shoe back in 2008?
Seven.
Maybe then. But that wasn't 37.5 points, I don't think.
No, I don't think so either.
I'll effort that for you, Tim.
Well, I mean...
Just because I like you.
I think Ohio State's going to have a hard time today covering 37.5 since they haven't scored yet. But to me, between Northwestern and that win, the Buckeyes are struggling mightily. That's why you play these games. To me, if you're a big underdog like State in Illinois, the win can only help you. It can't hurt you any more than everything else already has.
I think the listeners can infer Tim has some action on Ohio State covering the 37.5.
No, I stayed away because I thought they'd get all those guys out of there after they got a big lead so they wouldn't get hurt. Now they got to use them
now
to win.
You're just being modest. Don't worry. Ohio State ended the game against Iowa with 8 straight trips to the end zone. It's still possible.
Ask Brock if he likes Purdue. Iowa's lost 6 straight to Purdue. They're at Purdue today, and they're leading 17-0 in the second
That
quarter.
defies description.
We're out. We're back on the other side. Mad Dogs take on the game and more of Tim Stout's crippling sports gambling addiction here on White Law PLC Tailgate Show, 1240 WJIM and Classic Rock 94.9 MMQ.
Back with more of the White Law PLLC Tailgate Show on 1240 WJIM and 94.9 MMQ in less than 60 seconds. It's time for another game day travel update from the 1240 WJIM Traffic Center. Driven by Shaheen Chevrolet and Cadillac. Relax and enjoy the Shaheen difference.
Taking a look at your weather one more time. There's a wind advisory in Champaign until 8 o'clock tonight. That's 8 o'clock Central Time. Mostly cloudy skies, but it's eventually going to become mostly sunny with temperatures falling to about 50 degrees. But it will be windy. Again, wind advisory until 8 o'clock. Winds out of the southwest, 20 to 30 miles an hour, gusting as high as 50 miles an hour. It's 64 degrees right now in Champaign. Here in East Lansing, rain and wind, 61 degrees. There's a wind advisory until 8 o'clock tonight. Temperature steady in the mid-60s, but south winds 20 to 25 miles an hour, gusting as high as 50 miles an hour. And there'll be a chance of rain pretty much the rest of the day. Your weather update is brought to you by Shaheen Chevrolet and Cadillac. Relax and enjoy the Shaheen difference.
This is the White Law PLLC Tailgate Show on Lansing's Big Talker, 1240 WJIM and Classic Rock 94.9 MMQ. Today's broadcast is brought to you by White Law PLLC, Shaheen Chevrolet, Price Right Auto and RV, Blue Moon Belgian White. Now, let's talk to the Dean of Sports, Tim Staudt, and offensive-minded host, Beanie Howell from the Price Right Auto and RV Studios.
And we're back. White Law PLLC Tailgate Show, 1240 WJIM, Lansing's Big Talker, and Classic Rock 94.9 MMQ, live from the Price Right RV studio, and also brought to you by Blue Moon Belgian White, Shaheen Chevrolet and Cadillac, MSU Healthcare Sports Medicine, Dowding Industries, Schupan & Sons Recycling Industrial Services, Gravity Smokehouse, and MSU Federal Credit Union. It's time now for Mad Dog's Take on the Game with David Mad Dog DeMarco, brought to you as always by Blue Moon Belgian White, one of a kind every time, and Blue Moon is a proud partner of Michigan State Athletics. Mad Dog, how you doing, and you got any thoughts on Tunnelgate and what the reaction has been outside of this part of the world?
Hi, fellas. How you doing? Hi, Dean. Hi, Brandon. Hi, Brock.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon.
Hello, Dave.
75 and cloudy here in Cedar Bluff, Alabama. I watched that game last week at Gravity Smokehouse. I had brought a party of about 25 people in there. And because Dean knows you have to support your sponsors because they're golden, right, Dean?
They're golden. They're more than golden. They're more than
That's
family.
right.
They're more than family.
Almost.
Sponsors first,
Brandon,
family second.
Well, I mean, I know how he operates on his show. I think he's been doing it a long time. He's seen it all. And Brandon, you attended Michigan State not too long ago, really. You were in the band. You've been around, too. And, I mean, we saw the Devin Bush thing a couple years back. We've seen all these things with this rivalry. I called, and I know you had Chris on earlier. I called Chris first thing in the morning, Sunday morning early. And because I was in Lansing last weekend, and he was shook up talking to me. I mean, I've known him a long time, and Chris was shook up. I mean, you could tell he was still absolutely upset. I mean, he was right in the middle of it. You guys have seen it. I know that he wasn't injured, but I know that he got roughed up a little bit because he was right in the middle of that scrum. And after I've watched this all week long, I'm not on sports talk radio in that area, and I didn't even want to listen because I can imagine it was just like being in a straitjacket or having your hands in light sockets, listening to who was wrong, who was right, this, that, whatever. And I don't even know where to go with this, fellas. I mean, Dean, you're the elder statesman, and I know that you've talked about this with your friends and your family and with your fans and your listeners and your coworkers at 10 and with Brock and with Brandon. And Brandon, you've been doing this, you did it for 3 years, and you came back and took the slot over when I left, and you've been around. And it was just beyond comprehension that something like that could get out of hand. I mean, I don't even know what to say. It was at least no one was paralyzed, but I mean, getting hit in the head with a helmet like he was, the player from Michigan, and all the stuff that had gone on, and how Tucker handled it, how Harbaugh handled it. It was a disgrace to sports. It was a disgrace to both universities. I cut it right down in the middle. I mean, I know it was a gang kind of deal, but it shouldn't even have happened. And we've seen all this stuff in the past, in all the rhetoric, and all joking around Xanax week with Michigan State. This was assault. I mean, who's kidding who? And it was just terrible. And after everything that Michigan State and Michigan, with their doctor, Anderson, Nasser, I know people are bringing that in, but with such bad stuff that has happened in the last few years on both these campuses, and then for this to happen, like I said, it's beyond comprehension how I know the timing just got your ass handed to you. You got beat. They started out good, Michigan State did, but then they didn't cover. And I told you, Dean, that's the way you had to go. They didn't cover by one number, but it wasn't about the game. It was about the situation, and it could have been a lot worse, even though it was bad. And I mean, Tunnelgate, I know you put a spin on it, and we've heard all these kind of things with this, but somebody could have got seriously. I mean, they did get injured, but I mean, to the point of death. I mean, really. I mean, you got 10 guys messing with one or two guys like that, and emotions are running so high that you can't even know unless you're down there like Chris was. And like I said, I mean, Chris has been doing this a long time. I imagine I know what he said. I've talked to him a couple of times. And, yeah, Andrew Bood's texting me right now. I mean, I could go off how I really believe it, but I got to sort of be on par because I can't swear on the radio. I've known that for 26 years. It shouldn't have happened. And whether the Michigan State players were baited, not baited, I mean, you still got to have a little bit of common sense. You just do. And it was beyond comprehension from my standpoint because I couldn't believe how it got out of hand. And like I said, I talked to Chris Solari the next morning, and he still was pretty shaken up about it. And I really didn't, until I've watched it so many times, that's the way I feel. It could have been a lot worse. And now from you guys' standpoint, you're at ground zero. Tell me what people have been saying and what you guys think.
Oh, it's been exactly what you would predict. It's been so toxic, and we're on 1240 WJIM, and it's kind of appropriate because the fallout from this has been as toxic as Republicans versus Democrats. And I wonder if the MSU Michigan football rivalry has now crossed the point of no return the way it seems like American politics did in 2016 with that whole nasty election and everything that's happened since. It just seems like we've reached a point where there's no going back with the levels of toxicity. But I'm interested what if you could share, and maybe you can't, if Andrew Aboud was giving you some legal insights on this, because something I'm interested about is one of the players.
He was giving me some gas, is what he was.
Well, one of the players for Michigan, the aggrieved, according to Harbaugh, Jamon Green, hired an attorney that's seeking like civil damages, and the guy is a real bleep starter on Twitter. You can check him out. He's also the same attorney that Shea Patterson hired to get immediate eligibility, and that Curtis Blackwell hired when he sued Michigan State for wrongful termination and defamation and all that stuff, which, by the way, that was a losing case. But anyway, this guy has said he's going after MSU for culpability because of what happened in the tunnel. And I've heard from other lawyers, off the record, just me talking, that could be a strategic mistake, because if anyone is liable for what happened in the tunnel, it's U of M, as they're in charge of the infrastructure and security, and it clearly failed. And by the way, there's precedence here to show that this was not new. We've had 3 instances of confrontations between Michigan and the visiting team in 3 of their last 4 Big Ten home games.
Go ahead, Dean. I got to have your not spin. I got to have, and I'm not going to disagree with what anything has been said here so far. So the reason why I said beyond comprehension, because I just didn't know that it could get out of hand like that. But go ahead, Dean. You've been around longer than I have. So
I don't have anything further than, it was the dominant story for most of the week, and because there's been no the M Live heard from the U of M police that we don't have anything to tell you because we're not done yet. So the Big Ten hasn't said anything. Michigan State hasn't done anything further. There's nothing new to add. And I'm ready to move on and let Michigan State see if it can beat Illinois today. I'm tired of talking about it, to be honest with you.
Me too.
It's been beat to a pulp. So today's Saturday. It's game day. Let's play the game.
And it's toxic, Dave. It has a poisonous effect on both sides, honestly. And I'll tell you, obviously everyone reasonably agrees with everything Dave said. Inexcusable to resort to violence in practically every scenario, and certainly when your feelings are hurt because you lost a football game. That's no excuse for violence. But I'll tell you what else isn't helping. What else is not helping this and is increasing the toxicity and in flaring both sides, the regular people, which is where a lot of the hate is coming from, is one of the head coaches openly campaigning for criminal charges in this. Out of a fight between football players. Where are we headed? I would love to hear what lawyers have to say about that. And like Lynn Henning told Tim this week, how have we gotten to this point? This is a serious criminal investigation, a fight between football players. What's next? We're going to have lawsuits out of targeting penalties?
Like I said, the sports has come such in a direction that you can't even comprehend. I use that word. I never thought that some of this stuff, like with the Kyrie Irving, Gordon, or stuff like that, and I know that's totally opposite of what we're talking about, but and Tim's right. I know that if I was there, I'd be gagging maggots talking about this all the time, because and I told my family this, it just won't go away. And it is about the game. Can Michigan State go into Champaign, which they're there, with absence of some players that got suspended, and they're a 16-point road dog, and Bielema, we know the past between he and Michigan State when he was at Wisconsin. He's going to want to carve these guys like a turkey on Thanksgiving Day. And, when I read the offensive keys, I'll explain to everybody what I think. This is just a team that is, rudderless. It just is. I don't know if they can get a bowl game. I don't know. I don't know if they're going to have enough players to do this. And, I know that this is upsetting to everybody because of how well they were last year with Kenneth Walker III and the games that they won, and they go to a bowl game. But this, coupled with what happened last weekend, is just not a good situation, and they can right the ship again, being a 16-point underdog. Last week they were
23,
25 point. I mean, and they covered, which a lot of people probably were happy about. But, I mean, they were in the game for a while, and they did play pretty decent. And then, the bottom fell out. But I will read my offensive keys as we speak. Good afternoon. These are your O keys brought to you by White Law, PLLC, 517-316-1195. 60 years experience, $1 billion plus in results, 30,000 plus clients. Served fighting for their clients is their highest priority. Request a free consultation, and they want to give and I want to give a shout out to Jamie White. A lot has transpired since I gave you last week's O keys. This has gone from bad to worse with Mel Tucker's team this year. Now they have to travel to Illinois, where the Fighting Illini are a 16-point home favorite. Michigan State offensively and cohesively have to again try and put together an aggressive offensive scheme that will attack the defense. Peyton Thorne is 153 for 238 for 1,714 yards, 12 TDs, 8 picks. If he struggles today, pull him. He has to be better on the field in all facets, especially leadership, with this team, and I think he's up to the task. Berger has 89 carries for 384 yards, 5 TDs. Coleman has 36 catches for 548 yards, 6 TDs. Get the ball to Reed. The O coordinator has to pull out all the stops for the Spartans to have any chance for a victory. Total letter is at 3:30 Eastern. Brett Bielema right now, he is, of course, the head coach. He's got to be filing his teeth before this game. MSU has to be competitive and show up in this game, and that's pretty much a ambiguous blanket umbrella statement for this, and it's just unfortunate how this is all panned out. And I understand how people are on both sides of the fence of this thing last week, but again, like Tim said, and he's right, he's been around. Got to move on. This is football. These guys can't practice. They go to school, and they're still on scholarship until this is sifted through this investigation. This team, the players that are there, they have to play their hearts out today in Champaign.
What's your final score prediction, Dave?
I'm going to say 27-24 Champaign, the Fighting Illini.
Nail biter. Absolute, and a heartbreaking loss.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's been a lot of heartbreaking stuff going on, man.
Yeah, that heartbreaker.
I mean, it's just the way it is.
Sounds like the offensive keys kicked in to get them 24 against the nation's number one defense. If they get 24, how many have scored 24? And Brock, how many teams have scored 24 in Illinois?
I can tell you that. I got it right here.
Has anybody? Indiana got 23.
No one. The closest was Indiana scored 23 in overtime.
So it sounds like
overtime. Okay.
Dave's got that high-flying Spartan offense giving Illinois all at once.
Well, I look at it like this. You asked me last week what I'm the guy that picks the games. You're right. I am the guy that picks the games. I pick the right side, and I'm going to pick the right. So that's a lot of points. It just is.
It is.
I mean, I'm trying to be as upbeat as I can be and as positive as I can be, but being a realist.
Yeah.
I mean, they could go in there and just get clocked. I mean, you remember the Lovie Smith game a few years back when D'Antonio, they had him on the ropes, and Lovie Smith just blew them out. We've been exposed to so much stuff at the Michigan State chapter, and this is when you have a lot of success like they did last year, I don't know if they laid on their laurels. I don't know if this NIL thing has been not good and positive for the players of Michigan State. Transfer portals, you thought that some of these players that they were bringing in were going to help this team, and they haven't. They had the one last year. So I guess everybody's going to come down to sea level and see exactly, the Mel Tucker era and what is going on, because
well, they better hope Bishby.
They're going to have to struggle.
I was going to say they better hope Bishby is happy. He may want that money back to buy the Washington Commanders.
Yeah, that's actually he's mulling it. That's already been reported.
It's in the news today, so he may need the money back from State to go buy the Commanders. Just throwing that out there, right, Brock?
I know. I mean, I know that Dan Snyder's had so many problems with his team, and right now, there's going to be, if he puts that team up for sale, it's going to get sold. It's just going to get sold. That would be something if he ended up by buying that. And I wouldn't be surprised if that doesn't happen.
That's Mad Dog's Take on the Game, brought to you by Blue Moon Belgian White. Dave, thanks so much for making time. Let's do it again next week. We don't know exactly what time yet.
And everybody listening, have a great day. Enjoy it. See you.
All right,
take care, Dave. Appreciate it.
He's got Bama LSU tonight. That's obviously it's weighing on his mind. You can tell.
Oh, yeah.
That's weighing on his mind.
We'll take a break and talk about that, the point spread thereof, and a couple other big games as we close it out with you and give you our takes, our official predictions on MSU at Illinois in just a few minutes as we wrap up the Whitelaw PLLC Tailgate Show, live from the Price Right RV studio here at 1240 WJIM and Classic Rock 94.9 MMQ. Back after these words.
Another travel update from the 1240 WJIM Traffic Center. Next, the Mel Tucker Show is back for another season on Lansing's Big Talker 1240 WJIM and Classic Rock 94.9 MMQ. Get up close and personal with the head coach of Michigan State football every Thursday night. Be there in person or just call in and ask the questions you want answered. The Mel Tucker Show on 1240 WJIM. Brought to you by Ameriprise Financial, Dark Bank, Doubting Industries Incorporated, Chupin & Sons Incorporated, Blue Moon Belgian White. The Mel Tucker Show on 1240 WJIM. It's time for another game day travel update from the 1240 WJIM Traffic Center. Driven by Shaheen Chevrolet and Cadillac. Relax and enjoy the Shaheen difference.
One final look at the weather in Champaign, Illinois. There is a wind advisory in Champaign until 8 o'clock tonight. It will affect the game, you would think. Mostly cloudy early on and then gradually becoming mostly sunny during the game. Temperatures falling to about 50 degrees by the time we get to halftime. But the wind will be a factor. Winds out of the southwest, 20 to 30 miles an hour. Gusts as high as 50 miles an hour. Right now, 64 degrees and overcast. And, of course, windy in Champaign. Here in East Lansing, 63 degrees. Mostly a cloudy skies. There's a wind advisory until 8 o'clock tonight. The temperature will drop into the low 50s when we get dark tonight. Winds out of the south, 25 to 30 miles an hour, gusting as high as 50 miles an hour. That's a look at your weather one final time, and it's brought to you by Shaheen Chevrolet and Cadillac. Relax and enjoy the Shaheen difference.
This is the Whitelaw PLLC Tailgate Show on Lansing's Big Talker, 1240 WJIM and Classic Rock 94.9 MMQ. Today's broadcast is brought to you by Whitelaw PLLC, Shaheen Chevrolet, Price Right Auto and RV, Blue Moon Belgian White. Now, let's talk to the Dean of Sports, Tim Staudt, and offensive-minded host, Beanie Howell from the Price Right Auto and RV Studios.
All right, welcome back. Whitelaw PLLC Tailgate Show, 1240 WJIM Lansing's Big Talker, Classic Rock 94.9 MMQ, live from those Price Right RV studios. Also brought to you by Blue Moon Belgian White, Dart Bank Mortgage, Joe Sambear, Ameriprise Financial, Craig Stiles, DBI We Do Office, High Caliber Karting and Entertainment, The Student Bookstore, The Nut House, and Gazelle Wealth Management. All right, one last look at the scoreboard. Ohio State kind of figured it out, tied it up right before half, 7-7 Buckeyes, Wildcats in Evanston. You feel better, Tim?
Well, I mean, if people are just hearing that for the first time, they're going to wonder what's going on. You got they're now in the second half in both Madison. Wisconsin's crushing Maryland 17-0. Nebraska's still ahead, although Minnesota got a field goal. It's 10-3 Nebraska third quarter. And then the big other one is, the Big Ten West is on the line, frankly, and Purdue's behind at halftime at home to Iowa 17-3. You got the rest of the top 25.
Yes, power through it. Texas Tech falling behind now after an early lead. It's TCU at home with a 13-10 lead there in the third quarter. Number 17, North Carolina, trailing 14-10 in the third at Virginia. Number 19, Tulane, the apple of Tim's eye. They are 17-10 leading in the third quarter right now, and that wraps up the top 25
Could we have our first tailgate show next week in the morning of the season?
I got a feeling.
I was just thinking about that.
I got a feeling
How
it's gonna
blessed
happen.
have we been? We've not had one of those early tailgate shows yet.
Because I think Penn State will be 3:30. They won't go up against Michigan, Ohio State. And then Brock thinks the Indiana game could still get bumped to 3:30.
I hope you're right, because I don't want to do, what is it, 8 a.m.?
8:30 to 10:30.
I don't want to do that.
Yeah, we may find out tomorrow whether that's going to be
or tonight, frankly.
Possibly. Yeah.
Tonight, because last week, right after the Michigan State game, they told State you're playing at 3:30 at Illinois. But I've never remembered a year where we've gone this far into November without a game starting at noon.
Likewise. Kind of nice. I like it. But anyway, let's take a look at some point spreads before we give our predictions and wrap up the White Law PLLC Tailgate Show. The big one today is number 1. I'm doing college football playoff rankings. Number 1, Tennessee. At number 3, Georgia. Pair of 8-0 teams. Georgia laying 8. 3:30 on CBS. 77% of the tickets on this game on Tennessee, and 80+% of the money on the Volunteers as well. Your thoughts on that, guys?
Georgia wins, doesn't cover.
I'm with you, Beanie. I think Georgia will win and cover because they're upset that they're ranked 3rd. And I think they want to make a statement against Tennessee. Tennessee's defense isn't very good, relatively speaking. Georgia's is. They're playing at home between the hedges. I love Georgia.
Tennessee is this year's 2021 MSU. Flying high, riding this unexpected wave, but with the 120th passing defense. I think we see that come to the fore today, the kind of way it did at this time last year with Purdue against Michigan State. Georgia has 3 tight ends they're going to play on Sundays.
You know, the angle on this game is that the secondary market tickets are more expensive for this game than the World Series tonight in Houston. That's strong. That's strong.
More exciting, too. Right?
Probably speaking, yeah.
Less cheating going on in this game, too. That's just an editorialization.
Of course.
Georgia, I feel like, has been just on, autopilot since crushing Oregon in the opener, 49-3. They've looked bored, and they haven't really been challenged. I can't really blame them. But now they're awake and PO'd over that ranking. I suspect they win by, 10 points. How about this one? Also in the SEC, and I know you'll have thoughts on this, Tim. Number 6, Alabama, 7-1. At surprisingly relevant now, number 10, LSU, 6-2. Without getting into it,
I'm
Brian
amazed
Kelly.
Alabama's favored in the first place, to be honest with you.
Let's give Brian Kelly credit since falling 0-1 in a really fluky, weird game against Florida State to start the season.
In the Superdome, yeah.
They've won 6 out of 7. The one being a blowout loss in the Bayou to Tennessee, which is forgivable, I suppose. But they've put it together. They look like a good team. And then there's this 13.5. Yeah. LSU getting 13.5
at home
at night.
At home at night.
Isn't that madness? Or what do they know that I don't? That just seems nuts. And then there's this. Alabama has a legitimately, by their standards and SEC rankings this year, a bad defense. It's not good.
No.
And worse, Jaden Daniels, LSU quarterback, is the exact kind of quarterback that has given Saban's defense fits for the last 20 years.
Who's got a better chance to win, LSU over Alabama or Notre Dame over Clemson?
Notre Dame over Clemson.
Okay.
But that doesn't mean LSU doesn't have a chance.
Oh, I think betting against LSU at home in prime time and
I take LSU to cover.
13.5, that's crazy value.
I take LSU to cover.
Me too.
I don't think they'll win, but they'll cover.
Me too. And most of the betting public agrees. 68% of the tickets are on LSU with 59% of the money on the Tigers, too.
The quarterback's going to have a Heisman Trophy night, I think. I mean, he had one against Tennessee, and it wasn't good enough. He had one against Texas, and it was good enough at the bitter end. Can he do it at LSU? And like you say, LSU's coming on. They are ranked 10th.
Yeah. Destroyed Ole Miss last time out. Bye week, 2 weeks to prepare for this.
Yep.
Let's move to the last one I wanted to get on the board before we go to our picks and wrap up the show. You just mentioned it. Number 4, Clemson, 7-0 at Notre Dame. Speaking about how Brian Kelly, former Notre Dame coach, and LSU have put it together lately, so have the Irish. Since inexplicably losing at home to Marshall and falling to 0-2, they've all of a sudden won 5 of 6. Now, the one is concerning. They gave Stanford's only Power 5 win this year.
At Marshall. And they all sent home to Marshall.
Yeah.
But that was a long time ago now.
Next year when they open with Cade McNamara at quarterback in the opening game against Tennessee State in South Bend.
It's been a long time since that Marshall game, because listen to this. Of the last 5 games they've played, they've rushed for 200-plus yards 4 times. The one game they didn't was against Stanford, and they had 150. Notre Dame has figured something out on offense. The defense was already solid.
The defense is good. They'll be highly motivated. It's prime time in South Bend for this game, which can atone for the fact that somehow on God's green earth they lost at home to Marshall and Stanford, most notably Marshall.
And you know what? If Notre Dame wins out, the New Year's Six will find a way to put a 9-3 Notre Dame team in. But they would have to beat a USC at the end of the year.
And they will have beaten
That's where you'll see it tonight, prime time. So if you get sick of Michigan Rutgers on the Big Ten Network, you can go to Channel 10 and watch Notre Dame Clemson.
Irish getting 3.5 at home under the lights.
And Alabama LSU,
that's just a crazy value.
That must be ESPN. Alabama LSU's
it is.
Yeah, that's it. There are 3 games to watch tonight, huh?
Well, this Notre Dame game
Series.
Last thing on this Notre Dame game, it's the DJ Uiagalelei storyline because his star was born there 2 years ago when Trevor Lawrence was out with COVID. He throws for 400-plus yards, 2 touchdowns. They lose in double overtime. A chance to restore his former glory after getting benched in the third quarter of their barely comeback, overcoming 4-turnover win against Syracuse, their last time out. They've had a bye week.
There will not be a tunnel issue at Notre Dame. They built a tunnel for the visiting team.
All right, last one. We got about a minute and a half.
We're just going to do MSU, Illinois, our picks.
Illinois 27-14.
Illinois 26-9.
I'll go Illinois 30, State 7.
Does Michigan cover against Rutgers?
No, that's just a huge spread. Last I saw it was 26.5.
Yeah.
I can get you updated. We got time for that,
26.
right?
Well, they don't 26. have Jeremy playing tonight. They don't have the 2 guys that got hurt playing. Without them, they can't cover.
Those guys are in full-body casts, I heard. It's Michigan laying 26 on the road. Some things are just too crazy for gambling like that. All right, boys. It's been real. Thanks for being here. We'll do it again next week. The Whitelaw PLLC Tailgate Show is back a week from today on Saturday, November 12th. We don't know what time because MSU Rutgers game time has not been announced. But whatever it is, we'll come on air 3.5 hours beforehand and take you up to 90 minutes before kickoff. Thanks to our sponsors, Blue Moon Belgian White, Shaheen Chevrolet and Cadillac, MSU Healthcare Sports Medicine, Dowding Industries, Schupan & Sons, Gravity Smokehouse, MSU FCU, Dart Bank Mortgage Joe Sambear, Ameriprise Financial Craig Stiles, DBI We Do Office, High Caliber Karting and Entertainment, The Student Bookstore, The Nut House, Gazelle Wealth Management, and of course, Price Right Auto and RV and Whitelaw PLLC. Take care until next week. Until then, go green.
Lansing's Big Talker, 1240 WJIM Lansing, and Classic Rock 94.9 WMMQ East Lansing, Town Square Media Stations.